Welcome to another episode of Femgineer TV brought to you by Pivotal Tracker. I'm your host, Poornima Vijayashanker, the founder of Femgineer. In this show, I invite innovators in tech, and together we debunk myths and misconceptions related to building tech products and companies. Two very common myths are to start a company, you need to be in Silicon Valley, and to scale, you've got to have customers in the United States. Well, to help us debunk these two myths and many more, I've invited Marina Mogilko, who is the co-founder of LinguaTrip. LinguaTrip is a marketplace that connects language schools to language learners around the world. Thanks so much for joining us today, Marina.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. So it's wonderful to have you on the show. And you and I met back in 2015 when you had kind of focused on LinguaTrip and taking it from being an offline business to an online business, and you had just joined 500 Startups Accelerator. Yeah. So let's kind of go back in time a little to see how you actually got started in entrepreneurship.
So I have been a language learner myself, and when I was 14, my parents sent me to the UK to learn English, and I was this straight A student at school, and I thought when I arrived in the UK, I would be speaking English perfectly. And then I arrived at the customs, and the guy asked me something, I didn't get it.
Yeah.
And I realized that the language that I've learned at school is completely different from the real language. And then 2 weeks in the UK gave me amazing progress, and when I came back to St. Petersburg, I won like whole Russia Olympiad in English. And I realized this is the way to learn the language, and I did the same for German. And then when I was 18, I met Dimitri, who's another co-founder, and he told me, you speak languages so well, and you know how to do the whole process. Why don't we start a company together? And we had our classmate in the university who wanted to go to the UK to study English, and we decided to start with her. And in 2011, we sent her to the UK to learn English and start the company.
Wonderful. So you started the original inception of LinguaTrip in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Yes.
And it was an offline business.
Yeah, completely offline. You had to come to office, sign all the papers.
Yeah.
Everything was manual.
Yeah. And how long were you running that business for?
So we've been running it for 3 years. And during the second year, we realized that if we want to scale, we need to bring everything online, because we tried to open more offices in Russia. But that meant traveling, to these locations. And I didn't really like traveling at all because it's just like my city. So it was really complicated.
Yeah. And your business was pretty substantial, right? You had quite a lot of revenue even as an offline business, but decided to go online. Now, neither you nor your co-founder had any experience building an online business.
No. It was the hardest task actually when we started to look for a technical co-founder. So the salaries in Russia are pretty low, but still like having somebody technical with good experience costs a lot of money. So we had to reinvest everything. And Dima started to look for, somebody technical, and he's into karting. So he went to some race, and he saw a guy who looked exactly like somebody who would be coding.
Okay.
He just approached. He was like, "Are you coding?" He was like, "Yes, I am coding."
Okay.
So that was our first guy who helped us initially start. And then he invited a couple more people, and one of them became our co-founder.
Okay. So you originally had that offline business.
Yeah.
What happened to that business?
We eventually shut it down. So we still have that legal entity, but we don't do anything offline. So the main entity is in America, the online one.
Okay. But when you started the online business, you originally started it still in St. Petersburg, Russia.
Yeah.
Okay. When you were getting started, your customers were who exactly?
Mostly students, 18 to 24, willing to learn languages. So just like me, looking for this international experience.
Okay. And were a lot of them predominantly Russian, or where were they coming from?
They were all Russians.
Okay.
Like when we started, 100% Russians, 100% from St. Petersburg.
Yeah. And that was a pretty big market to get started.
Yeah, it's good money. So with one customer, we make around 25% in commission, and the average course would be like $1,000, $2,000. So once you get one customer, you can do a lot of things.
Yeah.
So once we had our first customer, we built a basic website. With the second customer, we rented a table and co-working space so we could do things.
Yeah.
It's just one customer.
But you were pretty successful at getting it off the ground and building a customer base outside of Silicon Valley and outside the US.
Yeah.
So walk me through why you decided to shut down that successful offline business and then take it online.
We couldn't do two things simultaneously because offline business requires a lot of people, because customers would come to your office, they would have coffee, they would sit with you for an hour asking all of the random questions like what do I do in London and all of that. And our mission is to have a small team, but a lot of revenue. So we decided to concentrate and put all our efforts in the online venture.
So aside from reducing overhead around employees and wanting to have more revenue, what other potential did you see in going from offline to online?
Another thing is not traveling. I didn't like traveling to all of the Russian cities and study offices, especially in winter.
Yeah.
And also, I think removing people from the chain itself, like meeting customers in person and signing all the papers, that was a great relief for me because I'm not personally really, willing to meet all of the people every day, like 20 or 30 people.
Okay.
And, reducing that human factor.
Okay. So you wanted to basically scale how you were managing your customers.
Yeah. And also an opportunity to reach to people in different destinations. Like the first booking that we had on our online platform came from far east of Russia. And that was so surprising. Like that was our first customer, not from St. Petersburg or Moscow where we had offices. And potentially we wanted to reach international people like from other countries as well.
Yeah, so that was a great reason to go online, was to get more reach within your own country, but also into other markets.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to me about that. How big is the language learning market across the world?
I think it's around 20 billion. So it's pretty big and people don't realize it, especially here in the States, because the majority of the market is outside the States. It's actually people coming to the States to learn English, and UK, Australia are the main destinations. So the market is pretty big in Asia, like Chinese. I have, friends who have companies in the same market and they have airplanes leaving every day with students, and that's so exciting. Russia is pretty big, and then Brazil. So South America, a lot of students do that.
That's great. So you have a big enough international market that you don't have to worry about starting in the US or being in Silicon Valley.
We still have customers from the States going to learn Spanish and then German, going to different locations in the world, Thai language.
Okay, but it's a smaller percentage.
It's a smaller market, definitely, because Americans do languages for fun mostly. And if we're talking about a Russian person, for example, they wouldn't be able to grow internationally if they don't speak good English.
Okay.
And you cannot really learn good English when you're in Russia. So.
Sure. Yeah, as you experienced early on. Yeah. So then walk me through what ultimately enticed you to then want to move from Russia to the US.
So growing internationally and being a Russian company, that doesn't work together. So if you want to be an international company, you have to have background somewhere in a country that people would trust. Like if you're an American company, they would perceive you better in Asia, in South America, anywhere in the world. And then, of course, 500 startups. That was like the reason why we moved initially, and receiving investment and getting access to all of the network. So everybody came in together, and then I started my blog about moving to the States, and it all kind of grew.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit, because you were actually still in St. Petersburg building your startup LinguaTrip when some people came to visit you, right? So walk us through that story of how you got introduced to 500 startups and to Silicon Valley.
Yeah, so initially we tried to raise in Russia, and we had this...
You tried to raise capital
raise capital in Russia. And we had these offers, like they would give us 200,000 euros, but they would take 40% of the company, and they would have 2 members on our board. That was unacceptable. So we tried to look outside Russia, and we finally got into this accelerator in St. Petersburg, which was within a university. And they didn't take equity, but they introduced us to this startup community. So we started visiting a lot of meetups. And during one of the meetups, John Ramey came, who introduced us to you. And that was like my 100th meetup. I was so tired. I didn't really want to go. And I called Dima in the morning and said, hey, I just got this email. Should I go? And he was like, I don't know, but, go and do that. So I went there, and John was sitting, like a king on the sofa. And there were people, Russian startup people, coming up to him and presenting the startup. And he was like, okay. That's good. Yeah. And I was like, okay. So I came, I pitched, and I saw him like standing up, and he looked interested.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't have a lot of time right now, and I'm leaving tomorrow, but we can meet tomorrow morning, and I will help you with your application, because we're applying to different accelerators. And yeah, we met and he introduced me to you. And I think within 24 hours, we had an interview with you. I was sitting in my kitchen, 3 a.m. in Russia, like wearing my pajamas and talking and presenting to you. And then within the next few days, we received an offer, and it was so exciting.
Yeah. So walk me through what that was like, going from being in Russia to being in Silicon Valley.
That was unbelievable.
Yeah.
That was just this tremendous growth because nobody really wanted to talk to us in Russia. We reached out to this media people, and they're like, "You're not interesting. We don't know even if people do that, like travel to learn languages, because this is not something common that you would do, but it's still a big market." So that was really tough, and it was really tough in terms of growth as well. And then we moved to the Valley, and everything changed completely. Like one article came out that we got into the Valley, and everybody followed up, and we got a lot of press. And then raising money and being able to try different marketing channels, that was like a life-changing experience.
Yeah, but you still had some level of difficulty even being in Silicon Valley, right? So maybe you can walk us through some of those obstacles.
There are loads of, starting a company, being a foreign person, like getting all the EINs, and that was complicated. Starting a bank account was easier because you introduced us to the right person.
Sure.
Yeah, and then what else? Getting visas.
Yeah.
So we were on a tourist visa initially, and it was okay to start a company, but you cannot work for your company while you're on a tourist visa. So we had to change, and we had to hire a lawyer who charged a lot of money, but he got us the work visas, and the rent is pretty high in the Silicon Valley.
Sure.
I was looking at Airbnb before we arrived, and I was like, "Oh, we could rent a van for $1,000 a month. We could just live there." So yeah, we finally found an apartment, but I was surprised how expensive it is.
Yeah.
And also I think another challenge during the program was because we wanted to do everything we could, meet people, attend all the lectures, but at the same time we had to grow the company to show this curve on demo day. And that was also really challenging. And we had all this press reaching out, so prioritizing was...
So even after you moved to Silicon Valley, though, because of the visa issue and all that, you ended up having to go back to Russia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so walk us through what that was like.
Yeah, so I stayed in the States for 8 months, and then I received the approval of my work visa, and I needed to go to Russia to have it stamped.
Okay.
So I came to Russia, I went to the embassy, and the guy who was interviewing me, he didn't really know what kind of visa I was applying for because it's an extraordinary talent visa. It's a rare one. And he looked me up in the system. He couldn't find me. And he said, "I'm refusing your visa because I don't see you in the system." I was like, "What's going on? Like everything is in the States now, like my company, investors, everything. And I cannot go there." So I called my lawyer and he said, "Don't worry, I had this case, like you're the second person who has this case in the last 10 years.
Oh.
But the last guy we managed to do that within a year. So we managed to get his visa in a year." And I was like, "Okay, 1 year. Okay, great." So I realized I would have to stay in Russia for a while. So he was trying to reach out to the embassy. I was trying to meet more people who are involved with America, like McFall, the guy who's in Stanford now. He used to be the U.S. consul in Russia. So we did a lot of things, and finally, in 3 months, they said, "Sorry, yeah, we finally found you in the system. Here's your visa." But that was so stressful. And then we decided to stay in Russia for some time because we needed to become cash flow positive.
Yeah.
Because being in the Valley and losing money every month is not really a good idea. And so we became cash flow positive in summer, and then we came back in autumn.
Okay, so there was quite a bit of back and forth. You weren't just like, once you were in the Valley, it wasn't like a hockey stick and a lot of success. It took you a little while, so you had to go back and forth. So now you still operate a lot in Russia as well as in the Valley, right? So walk us through what your day-to-day is like, given having to run the teams and how you split your team and your time.
Yeah, so every morning I wake up, we do everything on Telegram, and I have like 70 messages on Telegram.
Okay.
And I get back to our team and I check our e-commerce, so what they've done during the day. And then I answer my emails. I also have private consultations like higher education because this also helps me to get the sense of what's going on with the customers because they tell me their concerns. Sometimes they tell me what they don't like on a website, and I know their initial goals to actually go on a LinguaTrip. And Yeah, so during the day I have meetings and phone calls with the US, and then back in the evening, Russia wakes up, so we do some work with Russia.
Okay.
But I really like it as a manager because I spent some time in Russia during the New Year holidays, and when you're in the office, they ask you all of the questions because you're here and Marina, this is something. What can I do with this problem? And when you remove yourself, they can find the solutions themselves.
Yeah.
And they don't have to take up your time. So, yeah, I really
It helps you scale yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So initially we started talking about how you were attracting a lot of your customers outside of the US for your offline business. Let's talk about how you've started acquiring customers for your online business now, LinguaTrip as it is today as a marketplace. How do you go about reaching everyone in all these different countries and time zones?
So the first thing that really helped is PR because we had an article in TechCrunch, like all of the American media about us, about getting into 500. And then I also started my YouTube blog when we got into the States.
Okay.
And I started in Russian and I saw it growing and I started to do it more regularly. And then I realized it was actually in 2016 in spring when I realized that I can do the same content but in English.
Okay.
So I started my English channel and they both took off.
Yeah.
And this is how we're able to reach to many people in the whole world. And if you type in TOEFL, for example, which is an English language exam, I will be the first in every country in the world. Or if you type GMAT, which is an MBA exam, I will be the first in every country in the world. And then learn German. So because it was all personal, so I talked about my own experience, not like actually teaching people, but sharing what I went through. It really helped.
Yeah.
And for example, if I make a video about learning German, for example, I would also talk about my school that I went to. And the school is bookable on LinguaTrip. And I can give a link to LinguaTrip. This is how it all works. It's not really advertising, but just sharing what I went through.
Yeah, because I think you had done some advertising before, right? And
yeah, so surprisingly, we were thinking like Google AdWords is the key, but it doesn't really work. Like Facebook might work a little, but it's all about building trust because the average purchase on a website is $2,000.
Yeah.
And you have to convince people, especially Russian speakers and people from South America, that you're not some scam because they're used to, having a lot of scams.
Sure.
And it's about, building this brand and building trust.
Great. So now you have a YouTube channel that you're producing content for, and you have your main business that you're running. So that's quite a lot.
Yeah,
how do you manage that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and I have people helping me with YouTube, editing videos, and we have an amazing team who do like everything with LinguaTrip. But yeah, it's a lot of work, and I try to delegate as much as I can, but still I have to produce like 4 videos a week and run my own company. So yeah, I work all the time. Really like that YouTube is more like relaxation for me because I talk to my followers. I don't think I do a lot of scripts. It's just, I sit down and talk to them, which is exciting.
Yeah, wonderful. So what's next for LinguaTrip?
Growth, and growth.
Okay.
That's what we're concentrating on. So getting into new markets. We just had this amazing Spanish blogger come to Russia to learn Russian, and he has 1.6 million followers.
Oh, wow.
He's top 20 bloggers in Spain.
Okay.
So this would be our strategy, like working more with influencers.
Any last words of wisdom for our founders out there who might be outside of the US and looking to build their startup and attract customers who are also outside the US?
So yeah, I would say the first thing you should do is have traction in your market, in your country, because it's easier and it's cheaper because you probably have a place to stay in your parents' house or, rent at a low cost. Because coming to the States and being cash flow negative is really tough because life and everything is really expensive here. And we still have the majority of our employees in Russia because the costs are really low. So yeah, make sure your product grows and you're cash flow positive and then come to the States.
Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Marina.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting and thank you for, your impact on our lives.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah,
I will keep mentioning that conversation with Poornima 3M in Russia. It was life-changing.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to be part of that journey.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in today, and special thanks to our sponsor, Pivotal Tracker, for their help in producing this episode of FemGenier TV. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please be sure to share it with your friends and all the folks you know who are eager to start companies, whether they're in or outside of the US. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive the next episode. Ciao for now. This episode of FemGenier TV is brought to you by Pivotal Tracker. Build better software faster.